Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing a review of The Builders by Daniel Polansky. Now I mentioned this in one of my previous videos. The Builders is a story that is incredibly short. It's just over 200 pages. Very easily could be read in one sitting. I think I read my copy in 2 sittings. It is about a group of misfits who are collaborating again to exact revenge on someone. I'm not going to give any more details about the plot because I will probably give away spoilers. The way that this book is set up is that the first, part of the book is focusing on getting the band back together. The second part is about kind of the machinations that are going to be happening behind the scenes. And then the third part is what actually happens when this team of misfits actually exacts the revenge. So it's kind of split into 3 parts. And I have to say, this is one of these books that you just kind of have to buckle in and go along with it because it's very character focused and the plot moves quite quickly. But there's a lot to be said for the details and the nuances that we don't necessarily see at the surface level, obviously. Otherwise, they would be a nuance. Without further ado, let's jump into my review of The Builders. So what did I love about The Builders? I love the fact that the characters are actually animals. It's very odd. I don't know how to describe it, but the characters all take on animal characteristics and they look like those animals as well. But then they kind of act human, like they have human tendencies. It's very odd. I have like a very specific image of it in my head, but I don't know how to describe it. And that's why I'm not a writer. So it's just a bit odd. Like you don't really notice it later on in the book. It's very obvious at the start because the writer decided to focus on it, and I'm kind of glad that he did. But it just kind of, I did not expect it. And so as I was reading it and I was getting the descriptions of how each of the characters looked, it was just very jarring because one looks like a crocodile, one looks like an otter, I think it is, and it's just bizarre. It's just really bizarre, but it works because this book is quite quirky, and so with that kind of quirky edge to it, it makes sense. So you just kind of have to get on board with it. The next thing that I really loved about it is the fact that it's a really good revenge story. I think revenge stories tend to be quite overdone. They tend to be quite repetitive, but I have to say this was a really good take on a classic revenge story. The pacing is excellent. For me, revenge stories, sometimes they drag out and you're kind of like, okay, I just want to get this resolved. But we have 220 pages here to work with. So Polansky gets right to it. We get a lot of surprises and twists throughout the duration of the book that really kept me on my toes. The next thing that I really loved is the humor. The humor is fantastic. So I don't typically like to do kind of like author comparisons, but if you like the humor of Joe Abercrombie, you will like the humor of Daniel Polansky. They're very similar, but different in a different way. Joe Abercrombie, I've said this before, very dry British humor, my type of humor. It's very, very sarcastic, very dark. Polansky's humor is a little bit more witty. It's also very dark, but it's a bit more kind of cutting, if that makes sense. It's a bit more obvious than maybe say Joe Abercrombie's, but it works equally well. And that's why I think if you like Abercrombie's humor, you're gonna really like Polansky's humor because it's a slightly different take on it, but it's just executed as well, in my opinion. So just give it a go. I also really liked how it contrasted with the kind of heavy revenge tale theme aspect of it because it gives you a little bit of much needed light relief now and then. The next thing that I really enjoyed was the fact that Polansky's writing is absolutely stunning. I had no idea what to expect. I think this is also one of his earlier books. I could be wrong, so somebody fact check that. But the writing is extremely lyrical, which is not something that you typically get in grimdark fantasy. It's not something that you typically get in dark fantasy in general. It's almost quite poetic. It's very vivid, the writing. Like you feel like you're there with the characters. I just thought it was absolutely stunning. It was just beautiful. Like it just flows really beautifully. And I can't really say anything more beyond the fact that it's just really lyrical. And I think if you're looking for maybe a slightly different type of writing style in your grimdark or your dark fantasy or fantasy in general, then Polansky has a really nice way of going about it, I think. The next thing that I really loved as an extension of the writing style is the world building. I've said this many times before and I'll say it many more times again, I'm sure. I'm not massively into world building. Like, I don't need tons of it to conjure up an image of what the world looks like in my head. But Polansky does a really wonderful job of balancing out having enough world building that you can, you know, again, conjure up that image, but without making it feel like it takes up too much of the book. Because he writes it in such a lyrical way, it just, I don't know, I could just literally imagine every single scene in my head, which I just think is really hard. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not typically a reader who imagines every single scene in my head. Like, I tend to imagine certain scenes, things like, you know, when there's like a big political meeting, like in the town hall. That was a very specific example. But those types of instances, and then obviously battles are another one. You can, for me at least, I can always imagine like a really epic battle. I felt like that throughout the whole way in this book, and that's not really happened to me for a long time. So kudos to him for being able to do that. And I actually think it would make a really good like limited TV series. I think it would be so much fun. Last but not least that I'm going to mention, I wanted to keep this review fairly quick, is the characters. Obviously, I wanted to mention characters last because the characters really steal the show of this book. You know, as we all know, I am a very character-driven reader, and I'm much more interested in the motivations and the actions and the emotions of each of these individual characters. And we get that with every single character. There's quite a wide cast of characters. I think there's like 5 or 6 of them in the core team who are exacting the revenge. But they all felt really distinct. Like, you very quickly remember who is who. I've struggled with that in books where you have lots of different side characters. It didn't really feel like that to me. My favorite character was the captain. The captain is the main character. That's why his name is the captain. He's just the type of character that I like. You know, I like the kind of dark, mysterious leader who's done a bunch of shady stuff, very intelligent, and everyone kind of depends on them. Like, I love that archetype, and the captain is the epitome of that. So if you like that type of archetype, then I think you would really enjoy this book. But then there's also, you know, one character who's like the Joker, then there's one character who's like the business person, and there's one character who's like the fighter. So there's something for everyone. So if you're not necessarily as interested in that character as I am, then there will be something there for you. And I think that's another reason why a lot of people would like this book. Now, in terms of things that I didn't like, there was nothing. To me, this has actually been one of my favorite reads of the year. I cannot believe it's taken me so long to read Polansky, and I've got one of his trilogies, the entire trilogy. I've got his duology, and then I've also got the first book in another of his trilogies, or I think it might be a quartet actually. The point being is that I've got a lot of his books now, and I'm going to keep getting the rest of his books because I have a sneaky feeling that he's going to become a favorite author of mine. I think it's a bit too soon to say that right now because I've only read the one book, but it is fantastic. So I gave it a 5 stars, naturally. I strongly recommend it. I don't think it's too dark. So I think if you're somebody who is maybe trying to figure out whether grimdark is for them, I think this would actually be a really good beginner book to try out, because I don't think it's too violent. There's not tons of swearing, if any, actually, now that I think about it. The world is dark, but it's not so unforgiving that it's going to make you feel depressed, and it's going to make you question the world that we live in. Like, I don't think it's as philosophical as that. So I think it's a really good beginner one if you're looking to dabble. So there we have it, folks. Let me know if you've read this book. I literally know no one who has read this book. I know a couple of people have picked up Polansky, but I've never come across anybody reading this book before. So let me know if you have, and if you have any questions about it, if you haven't read it, as always, just ping me in the comments or on any one of my channels and I'd be happy to answer. But I hope you pick it up. It's fantastic. Keep me posted if you do, and I'll see you in the next one, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I'll speak to you very soon. Ciao.